Some days feel like something inside you has been quietly scraped thin. A weight you didn't choose, yet you still carry. And it stays with you longer than you admit. Life keeps pressing in with small cuts. Not loud, not dramatic. Just steady enough that the mind feels a little frayed at the edges. Stress settling into the body without asking. Worry looping before you notice. Fears slipping into moments that were supposed to be calm. And the quiet disappointment that arrives even when no one else sees it. Each touch feels minor, yet the sum is heavy. You sense it in the way your thoughts scatter. In the way your patience shortens. In the way your inner grip weakens for reasons you can't quite name. It adds up. It always adds up. And letting it pile there never ends well. When the damage goes unattended, something inside starts to sag. The days feel heavier, not because they are harder, but because you enter them already worn. You move through tasks with less clarity. Decisions feel like dragging your feet through mud. You meet the world from a place that is already drained, already pulled, already tired. The inner ground that once felt stable begins to slip a little. You feel it. You try to ignore it. Ignoring only deepens it. The old thinkers understood this in a way that still feels unsettlingly precise. They knew the mind is not a machine that runs untouched. They knew it bends under pressure, absorbs the day, collects the weight of every unfinished thought. They treated the inner self like something that must be tended or it will slowly close in on itself. Not a dramatic rescue, not a grand overhaul, just the quiet work of clearing out what doesn't belong. A steady return to center, made daily and without fanfare. A repair you make before the cracks spread. And this is what the rest of the journey offers. Not a doctrine, not a promise. Just 12 small ways to keep the mind from collapsing under its own load. 12 repairs that act like soft resets, giving the inner space a chance to breathe again. Simple enough to practice without ceremony, yet strong enough to shift the weight you've been carrying. They form a kind of maintenance the day cannot steal from you. A way to meet life without feeling conquered by it. The work is quiet, but the shift is real. Some mornings arrive with a strange weight, a quiet pressure that wasn't there the night before. It sits behind the eyes, a leftover echo from something already gone. The mind picks up yesterday as if it were happening again. A comment, a silence, a moment that didn't land right. It replays itself without being asked, turning small scenes into a dense fog. And the body follows that script, tightening as if the past still has teeth. There's a familiar pull in that loop, a kind of automatic drift. But it's only a replay, nothing more. There's a soft truth hidden beneath that noise. Enjoyment in the present fades when the mind keeps reaching backward. Even simple things lose their color. The air feels thinner. The day feels slightly out of reach. Not because something is missing now, but because something old keeps interrupting. A single memory can dull an entire morning. A short thought can blur the edges of an entire day. Still, the present sits here, unaffected, patient. It waits for attention to return. It always does, just not on its own. Sometimes the only honest move is to look at whatever lingers from yesterday, to see it without rushing to judge it. Acknowledge the sting, the clumsiness, the regret. Let it be real for a moment, not exaggerated, not denied. There's a quiet steadiness in that, a pause that loosens the grip. And once the shape of it becomes clear, the question appears on its own. Does this need to be carried any further? Usually the answer is simple. No. That single word shifts something inside, even if just a little. Letting go isn't dramatic. It's a small, deliberate release. A gentle refusal to give old thoughts a permanent room in the mind. They try to stay, of course. They come back in soft waves, asking for attention. But each time they appear, there's another chance to unclench, to clear out the space they fill without permission. A breath helps. A pause helps even more. In that stillness, the mind feels less crowded, less tangled. A quiet stretch of inner space opens up again. And in that space, the day becomes lighter. Just a little. But enough. An analytical thought rises when the mind starts tracing the pattern behind its own fatigue. There is a point where the load becomes heavier than expected, not because the tasks grow sharper, but because the inner ground softens without warning. The structure bends, the pressure seeps in, and the moment it pushes too far, the exhaustion feels almost inevitable. A quiet reminder appears in that strain. A weak foundation cannot carry every weight placed upon it. Not for long, not without consequence. The mind knows this before the body admits it. The crack comes first, then the overwhelm, then the long exhale that feels like surrender, though it is not. It is only recognition, and recognition is a pause. A clearer line forms when examining the commitments that once seemed harmless, a simple agreement, a small yes. Another promise made while assuming strength that may not be present today. It becomes obvious how much trouble begins there. In the moment before the decision, in the assumption that capacity is fixed, not shifting. Knowing capabilities is not a rigid inventory. It is a quiet awareness of the current limits, even when ego asks for more, even when impatience whispers that it should be fine. The truth stays still beneath the noise. Capacity changes, energy thins, focus drifts. Ignoring that reality never ends well. A small pause before committing can save hours of carrying what should never have been picked up. A pause. Just that. There is a discipline in adjusting commitments without feeling defeated. It takes restraint to accept that today's mind may not match yesterday's ambition. A subtle recalibration, a step back, a breath. The commitments do not vanish. They simply shift into a shape that fits the present state instead of the imagined one. This adjustment is not weakness. It is alignment. And alignment steadies the ground beneath the next step. A small correction now prevents a collapse later. That simple truth sits quietly, waiting to be acknowledged. Quiet, but firm. Then comes the harder part, deciding what truly matters in this moment. Essential tasks rise to the surface when everything else falls silent. The noise of urgency fades, revealing only what must be done. The rest can wait without the world unraveling. Letting them wait is its own kind of strength. Not avoidance, not surrender, just clarity. The mind feels lighter when it stops pretending it can hold everything at once. A lighter mind moves better, thinks better, breathes better. And in that space, a small anchoring thought settles in. Enough for now. You can feel it. That small tension you keep pretending isn't there. It sits quietly, waiting for you to look away just a little longer. And somehow, a tiny discomfort turns into something that corners you. You know this pattern. It always starts with the things you decide not to face. There's a strange honesty in noticing how a small worry grows. It doesn't shout at first. It whispers. A subtle weight at the back of the mind, easy to dismiss, easy to postpone. Yet every time it's ignored, it stretches itself, inch by inch, until it fills the room. And by the time it feels overwhelming, the mind acts surprised, as if it hadn't been warned from the beginning. Quiet signs were there. You just didn't want to deal with them. There's a certain relief in meeting a problem when it's still small, before it gains momentum, before it learns to take root. A simple step, taken early, can keep the day steady. The mind steadies with it. No drama, no noise. just a clean choice made at the right moment. It's strange how manageable things remain when faced the moment they appear. A calm correction, a brief pause, a gentle adjustment before anything spirals. And there's something disarming about admitting this truth. Small problems stay small only when you choose to meet them, not later, not when you feel like it, but when they first surface. Most of them want nothing more than a bit of attention, a tiny repair before they grow teeth, a moment of clarity before they start rewriting the day. Respond early and the mind feels lighter, more grounded, less tangled in avoidable clutter. A single breath can be enough to keep everything in place. But leave those same small things unattended, and they turn. Slowly, then all at once, what was once a minor crack becomes a fracture that demands everything. Energy you don't have, time you didn't plan for, focus you were saving for something meaningful. Suddenly the day is shaped by what you refuse to handle in a few quiet minutes. A quiet refusal becomes a storm. A tiny spark becomes something that scorches the inside of your mind. It never had to be that way. Yet this is how small things transform when given nothing but avoidance. There's a sharp clarity in seeing this cycle for what it is. A simple pattern. Predictable. Relentless when ignored. Gentle when addressed. The mind doesn't need perfection. It only asks for presence. A small moment of responsibility before the moment slips. A choice to face what's here, while it's still soft, still light, still easy to shape. And somewhere in that choice, a quiet strength appears. A steadiness that doesn't shout. A sense of control that doesn't demand attention. Just a quiet understanding. Small things only become disasters when you abandon them. Face them early. Face them lightly. Face them before they grow. That's enough. There is a quiet truth that settles in when the mind starts noticing what it has been carrying. A heavy tone, a faint sting, the slow erosion that comes from keeping what should have been released long ago. Holding on to toxic elements doesn't just disturb the surface. It seeps in. It moves through thoughts, dulls clarity, warps reactions. And it happens quietly, too quietly, until the weight becomes familiar, almost natural. And that is the dangerous part. The moment something harmful starts feeling normal. A moment worth pausing for, a moment worth naming, because the mind knows when it is being poisoned, even if the rest of the body keeps moving through the day. There comes a point when soft adjustments no longer change anything. A point where patience is simply another form of delay. Sometimes removal is the only solution. A clean cut, a firm distance. A step back that feels harsh at first, but honest. The hesitation before it happens is always louder than the act itself. The mind resists because it remembers the comfort, even if the comfort was brittle. But clarity returns the moment the separation begins. Space opens, breathing deepens. A quiet signal forms inside. This was necessary. This was overdue. And in that space, a different responsibility appears. The responsibility of choosing what gets access to the inner room. Every influence asks for a small entry point. A message, a gesture, a memory, a voice. And without noticing, those small entries become patterns that shape emotions more than any grand event. Deciding what deserves entry is not about control. It is about respect for one's own stability. A simple, steady filter. A quiet boundary. A recognition that not everything deserves the same closeness. Not everything should be allowed to shape the tone of the day. Sometimes a single sentence inside becomes the anchor. Choose with intention. Once the decision is made, the removal must begin. Not violently, not impulsively, but immediately. Even if the steps need planning. Even if the process is slow. Delay always tries to disguise itself as caution, yet it only prolongs the damage. Beginning now, even in a small way, restores a sense of direction, a sense of self returning to its own hands. The first step is often nothing more than a quiet shift in distance, a small reclaiming of space. And that small act becomes the point where the mind finally exhales. Some moments reveal themselves quietly, almost unnoticed, like watching a small crack appear on a surface you thought was firm. It happens in a single decision, a small bending, a tiny permission you give yourself. And the shift feels harmless at first, but something inside registers the tremor. Something knows the structure just weakened. There's a certain fatigue that comes from bending too often, a heaviness that grows each time you let a small excuse pass. The day feels looser, softer, harder to hold on to. And underneath that softness lies an ache you can't quite name, a sense that you've slipped out of alignment with yourself. It's subtle, but it lingers. It drains. You feel it most when the day gets quiet, a small crack. In those moments, it becomes clear how every compromise takes a piece of solidity from life. Not because the world demands perfection, but because the mind collapses slowly when nothing inside it is firm. The loss isn't dramatic. It shows up as scattered thoughts, restless choices, and that quiet suspicion that you've drifted too far from the person you meant to be. Integrity erodes like that, not with noise, with softness. Principles start to look different when you see them this way. Not as rules, not as ideals, more like the internal beams that keep your sense of self from sagging under weight. They hold the quiet parts upright. They keep your own respect from slipping. Without them, the mind becomes a place where any thought can push you off center. With them, there is a boundary, a line drawn calmly, a structure that stands even when the day shakes. A load-bearing wall, there's a calmness in choosing just a few of these walls each morning. Not many, not heavy, just 3 lines you refuse to cross. 3 things that define how you want to show up. The clarity is gentle, almost relieving. It lifts the noise out of the air. It simplifies the day in a way that loosens the tension in your chest. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to remain aligned with the few truths you set for yourself at the start. 3 quiet anchors. And once they're chosen, the weight settles in a different way. The day stops being a field of shifting impulses. There's a steadiness that comes from holding your own line. A quiet firmness that doesn't shout and doesn't need to. You feel the friction when you're tempted to bend. You feel the small sting of wanting the easier path. But you stay with the principle, not out of pride, but because breaking it would cost something deeper. You keep the line, no compromise. There's a strange kind of peace that follows, not triumphant, not loud. Just the calm sense that you didn't abandon yourself. That today, the structure held. It starts with a simple observation of cause and effect, like tracing a line backward to its source. Pressure never appears out of nowhere. It builds in small, quiet increments, hidden under habits of silence and restraint. The mind tightens around what it refuses to feel, and the body adapts as if this were normal. But the weight still accumulates. The load still thickens. And eventually, it betrays its presence through tension you can't quite explain. A pause, a heaviness, a sense that something inside is pushing against the walls. Holding everything inside creates a strange kind of internal chamber. At first, it feels manageable, even useful. There's a belief that storing emotions will keep the surface calm, that restraint protects stability. But the chamber narrows over time. The air changes. The pressure rises in ways you feel but don't address. Thoughts cluster. Emotions compress. and a quiet discomfort starts to simmer beneath routine moments. It becomes harder to breathe without feeling that tight pull from within. Harder to move through a day without sensing the noise you've trapped inside. It's subtle but persistent. A warning. Releasing pressure doesn't require drama. It doesn't need an audience. It only asks for honesty before the tension becomes something else. A slow exhale. A truth spoken aloud when no one is watching. A small admission you've delayed because facing it seemed inconvenient. These small releases prevent the abrupt, destructive outbursts that often surprise even the one who carries them. A buildup ignored long enough always finds a way to break free. And the moment it does, it rarely chooses gentleness. Letting go in smaller, quieter doses keeps the foundation from cracking, keeps the inner structure intact, keeps the mind from shaking under its own hidden weight. There is always an uncomfortable thing waiting to be said. A truth that feels sharp at the edges, the kind you avoid, not because it's complicated, but because acknowledging it forces you to confront your own inner dissonance. Saying it out loud shifts something. It clears a small corner of the mental space. It steadies the pulse. It removes the false stories you create to avoid the simple fact that truth, spoken plainly, relieves more pressure than silence ever could. Even a single honest sentence can bring the mind back into alignment. A brief moment of clarity. A reset. Stability isn't built by holding every emotion hostage. It's shaped by letting the pressure move through in controlled, deliberate releases. Quiet honesty. Small confessions. A willingness to meet what you feel without fear of breaking. Each release brings you back to a steadier place where the weight feels lighter and the mind can breathe again. And in that stillness, something resolves. Something loosens, something returns to balance. Enough. You know the truth hits hardest when it's spoken plainly. Going through life without a backup plan doesn't make anyone brave. It just leaves the mind fragile. One unexpected turn, and everything shakes. The pulse rises, the breath shortens, and the grip on yourself slips before you even notice. Panic grows fast when there's nothing underneath to hold you. That's the part that stings the most. Not the problem itself. The discovery that you weren't ready. A quiet ache forms there. Sharp, undeniable. So the mind turns to a simple practice. Let the imagination walk into the uncomfortable, not to suffer early, but to soften the shock later. Picture a plan breaking, a path closing, a promise failing. Let the thought settle long enough to see that you can endure it. There's a steadiness born from this, a slow exhale, a small space opening inside. A reminder that control doesn't come from hoping everything goes well. It comes from knowing you won't collapse if it doesn't. That's the anchor. And then there's the quiet work done before anything happens. The backup plan formed without drama. Simple, clear, ready. Not created out of fear, but out of respect for your own limits. A way to stay upright when the ground shifts. A way to keep your hands steady when the noise rises. It's the kind of preparation no one sees. Yet it changes how you move, how you respond, how you carry yourself in moments that would twist you a year ago, even a week ago. A brief pause holds that truth. But the deepest layer sits in the mind itself, preparing it for friction, for surprises, for moments that don't ask permission. This preparation is quiet, almost invisible, a slow toughening, a slight widening of the inner space where reactions form. You feel the difference when the world pushes. The heart stays low. The breath remains grounded. A calm sentence rises inside before chaos does. That's the real preparation, not the plan on paper. The mind that won't shatter when the plan fails. Everything becomes lighter then. Not easier, just steadier. and steadiness holds. The first thoughts that enter the mind often decide the weight of the hours ahead. A quiet beginning can steady the whole day. A noisy one can drain it before it starts. It's strange how something so small can tilt the balance, yet it does, again and again. And in that first moment after waking, the mind feels exposed, almost fragile, as if anything can leave a mark. A single rush, a single worry, a single pull from the world. They slip in so easily. And once they do, the tone shifts. Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. A simple truth settles in the background. The morning shapes more than it reveals. Pause here. Let it land. A cluttered environment creates a cluttered mind, even when the clutter seems harmless. There's a tension that builds when objects push into the edges of attention. A low noise that lingers, barely noticeable until it becomes too loud to ignore. The eyes catch on unfinished things, scattered things, neglected things. And each one takes a piece of focus. Each one demands a small response. It's enough to throw the mind off balance before the day even has a chance to begin. Clearing the space becomes less about neatness and more about breathing room, a way to let the mind stand on its own without being pulled in every direction the moment it wakes. Simplicity becomes a kind of shelter, a small one, but steady. And sometimes steady is enough. There is a need to protect the morning mind from external influences, not out of fear, but out of respect for its softness. Those early minutes are open territory, and anything can slip in unchallenged. Messages, demands, opinions that don't belong. The world pushes fast, and it rarely waits for permission. If there is no boundary, the day becomes a reaction instead of a direction. There is a quiet strength in choosing what enters first. A filter, a guard at the gate, not to shut the world out, but to let yourself arrive before everything else does. A brief sanctuary where the mind can gather itself and face the day from a place of choice, not collision. Hold that thought. Dedicating the first 30 minutes to yourself is not indulgence. It is a way of claiming the ground under your feet before stepping onto the road. A small window where nothing needs to be answered, fixed, or chased. Just space, just breath, just awareness settling into place. These minutes don't need to be profound. They just need to be yours, unshared, uncontaminated, free from the rush of expectations that always arrives too soon. In that short pocket of time, the mind remembers its own rhythm. Slow at first, then steady, then clear enough to meet the rest of the day without stumbling. A quiet beginning. A grounded start. And sometimes, that is all it takes for the rest of the hours to fall into place. Something quiet settles in the mind when noticing how the day begins. A small shift. A faint tilt. And suddenly the direction changes. The first thing entering the mind tends to echo longer than expected. It colors the mood. It shapes the pace. Sometimes it even decides the tone before any intention is set. A gentle reminder forms beneath the noise. The mind doesn't start neutral. It starts open. And whatever arrives first leaves a mark. A soft mark, but still a mark. There's a moment when it becomes clear that the mind slowly molds itself around what it consumes. Not instantly, not dramatically, just a quiet accumulation that reshapes the inner landscape. Thought by thought, fragment by fragment. The mind leans toward what it repeatedly absorbs, even when no one notices the shift happening. And when that realization settles, it becomes harder to ignore the subtle pull of every choice. Every word, every image, every idea. All of them nudging the mind toward a direction it will eventually call its own. A simple truth stands still in the center of all this. The mind becomes what it's fed. Nothing more mysterious than that. There's a certain responsibility in choosing what enters the mind. Not heavy, not harsh, just steady. A reminder that every mental doorway can be opened with care or left unguarded. Being strategic isn't about avoidance. It's about clarity. Choosing not from fear, but from awareness. The awareness that attention is limited, that mental energy is finite, that every bit of noise steals something small but real. So the mind asks, almost quietly, what deserves space? What earns a place in the inner room where thoughts grow? The question lingers. It should linger. There's a calm discipline in feeding the mind with things that strengthen rather than scatter it. Quality doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to impress. It simply needs to nourish. Something steady, something clean, something that leaves the mind clearer than before. The contrast becomes obvious the moment junk tries to take the same space. It leaves clutter, restlessness, a thin layer of agitation. And the difference between the two is felt far before it's understood. A quiet line forms between what lifts and what drags. And once seen, it's difficult to pretend otherwise. The mind deserves better fuel, better input, better ground to stand on. A small pause rests at the end of all these thoughts. A pause that feels like a choice waiting to be made. And that choice begins with what the mind allows in. Some moments reveal a quiet pattern in the way the mind moves. It hesitates before difficulty, even when the path is clear. A small pause, a subtle pull toward the easy option. And it's in that pause that something true becomes visible. There's an untested strength sitting beneath the surface, waiting for a push. Not loud, not dramatic, just there. And it won't show itself until pressure invites it upward. The mind keeps pretending it needs certainty first. But the truth is simpler. Capability is often hidden behind the things we avoid. A single step into the harder space exposes what was dormant. A step taken before you feel ready. A step taken without applause. Just a quiet decision that becomes a quiet shift. There's a strange steadiness that arrives when discomfort is chosen instead of feared. Not the kind that overwhelms, but the kind that sharpens. The kind that teaches the body to stay when it wants to leave. A gentle edge to lean against. And leaning into it becomes its own form of preparation, long before life forces anything on you. Because pressure hits differently when the mind has already practiced finding its center. Suddenly, the unexpected feels less like an attack and more like another weight you've learned how to carry. A simple reminder. I know this feeling. I've stood here before. Sometimes the harder option is small and almost invisible. Taking the extra moment when rushing feels easier. Finishing what you started even when the spark is gone. Choosing effort when comfort whispers for attention. These choices rarely impress anyone, but they leave a mark on the inside. Each tiny act carves out a little more room for discipline, a little more space for clarity, a little more trust in your own direction. There's a quiet power in picking the path that asks more of you. A power that grows slowly, almost secretly. And with time, the mind learns its own weight. It learns that difficulty doesn't have to threaten it. It learns that effort doesn't have to drain it. It learns that hard things can be approached without panic, without bargaining, without the old story of not being enough. Training doesn't make life lighter. It makes you steadier. It gives you a stance you can return to when the world tilts. A stance built from repetition, not perfection. A stance built from simple challenges met with quiet persistence. In the end, resilience isn't something you wait for. It's something shaped by the choices no one sees. choices that feel small in the moment. But they become the ground you stand on when everything else begins to shake. And that ground, earned, not given, has a weight of its own. There's a certain clarity that appears when looking closely at how collapse truly happens. It rarely arrives as a sudden strike. It forms slowly, in quiet corners, in moments that seem too small to matter. A minor crack, a subtle strain, a thought left unresolved. Then another, and another. The pattern becomes visible only when the weight is already unbearable. The uncomfortable truth is simple. Ignoring small problems leads to massive disasters. Not instantly, not dramatically, but inevitably. That inevitability is the part that stings. The mind knows when something is off, yet it waits, hoping it will pass, hoping it won't demand effort today. And the delay becomes its own damage. The delay becomes the disaster. A short pause here, a reminder to breathe. There's a different kind of strength in meeting the small things while they're still small. A quiet steadiness, a kind of inner housekeeping. Small damage caught early is easy to fix. It's gentle, manageable, almost effortless. A loose thread is simple to tie, a hairline crack is simple to seal. A drifting thought is simple to straighten. But left untouched, the thread unravels. The crack widens. The thought becomes a storm that blinds everything else. Addressing a whisper is easier than fighting a shout. And the mind knows this. It feels the early signals long before the chaos. It always feels them. Stillness here. Let it settle. There's value in looking inward on purpose, not dramatically, not obsessively, just consistently. A calm inspection of the inner room before the day begins its pull. Perform daily self-examination, not to judge, not to punish, only to understand what needs attention. A quick scan of tensions, a check on the small frictions, a look at what's starting to pile up in places it shouldn't. These tiny observations become a kind of daily repair, a way of keeping the inner structure from bending under its own unnoticed weight. The practice is quiet, soft, steady, and it keeps the mind honest with itself. Hold the pause. Let the silence do its work. There's a relief that comes with catching problems early. A gentle exhale. A sense that things remain within reach. Catch problems early to simplify repair. The earlier the recognition, the cleaner the fix. No rush, no panic, no scrambling to undo the damage of weeks or months. Just a simple adjustment, a shift in direction, a correction that happens before the drift becomes dangerous. Early correction feels small, almost insignificant. Yet it protects everything that matters from falling apart. And it reinforces a truth that's easy to forget. Maintaining the mind is easier than rescuing it. A short, firm note here. Stay aware. It's strange how easy it is to claim you want a meaningful life, yet keep wasting your days on things that dissolve the moment you look away. Almost like choosing emptiness with your eyes open. The mind feels it. That quiet hollowness after a long day spent on nothing that survives the night. A kind of tired that sleep can't fix. A reminder that temporary distractions can fill the hours, but they never fill you. And there's a point where you can't pretend you don't notice anymore. A point where the silence calls you out. Hard. That's when the weight of real work becomes clear. The kind of work that stays, something that doesn't disappear just because the day is over. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need permission. It simply anchors you, gives shape to your effort, gives gravity to your days. You feel different when you're building something that won't vanish tomorrow. There's a quiet steadiness to it, a sense that you're placing stones instead of smoke. And one stone at a time, your life stops feeling like a blur. It gains texture, density, direction, a place to stand. Some days, the idea of creating something that outlives the moment feels distant, almost unrealistic. But the truth sits there, uncomfortably simple. If nothing you touch lasts longer than today, then nothing you touch ever belongs to you. The hours slip through your hands without leaving a mark. And deep down, you know you're meant for more than surviving a schedule. There's a part of you that wants to leave a trace, a quiet proof that you were here. Not loud, not grand, just real. Just something that endures when the noise fades. Nothing more, nothing less. So the focus returns to the daily work, the kind you can't skip, the kind that slowly shifts who you are. One small piece of permanence built every day. A sentence, a skill, a habit, a brick. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it lasts. As long as it doesn't evaporate the moment you turn away. Some days the effort feels insignificant, almost invisible. But you keep at it. You place the next piece, then the next, quietly, patiently, consistently. And somewhere along the way, your life gains a backbone, a structure you can lean on, a path you can trust. That steady work becomes a kind of inner anchor. It reminds you that meaning isn't given. It's built. It's earned in the slow, unglamorous moments when no one is watching. And the more permanence you create, the less you feel the old emptiness pulling at you. The less you drift. The less you break. Because you finally have something that holds. Something that carries your name without needing to be announced. Something that stays when the day ends. A small thing, but lasting. Daily repair decides more than it appears. It draws the line between a life that quietly expands and a life that only holds on. The gap feels small at first. A small crack, a small heaviness, a small hesitation. But those small things gather weight fast. And the only thing that keeps them from taking over is the steady act of tending to the places that tire. The places that bruise. The places that you'd rather ignore. It isn't dramatic. It isn't heroic. It's just the quiet discipline of noticing what's wearing thin and touching it before it breaks. A simple gesture, a steady breath, a small return. That's where the shift begins. And the difference becomes real. Real in the body, real in the mind, real in the way the day feels when it first opens. Quiet, clear, yours. The repairs themselves stay humble. Nothing complex, nothing grand. Just simple steps that demand a kind of inner honesty most people avoid. Simple, but not easy, because ease would require no resistance. And here, the resistance comes from within. From old habits. From old reactions. From the urge to carry one more burden instead of releasing it. The work lies in facing that urge without feeding it. Letting it pass. Letting it soften. Letting it lose its grip on the day. Some moments stretch. Some moments tighten. Some moments pause in the middle of nowhere, asking for just one more breath before moving on. That pause matters. That breath matters. Quiet, but sharp. There's no need to take everything on at once. The mind rebels under too much weight. It bends. It shuts down. It looks for escape. Starting with what hits hardest cuts through the fog. The repair that stings. The repair that exposes something you've been stepping around. The repair you feel even before you admit it. Touching that one first loosens the rest, softens the edges, gives the days a different shape. Like clearing the first stone in a blocked stream, everything else moves again, slowly, then steadily, then naturally, one shift at a time, one crack at a time, one quiet release. Enough to change the tone of the day, enough to remind you that not everything is out of reach, enough to let the mind breathe again. Stop here. Morning always returns with a strange kind of mercy. A reset you didn't earn, but still receive. A soft chance to fix what slipped through your fingers the day before. A chance to meet yourself without the noise of yesterday clinging to your thoughts. The air feels lighter. The mind feels open, even if just a little. And in that small opening, something can be repaired. Something can be aligned. Something can be reclaimed before the world rushes in and tries to claim the day for itself. A quiet moment. A steady moment. A moment that waits just long enough for you to notice it and step into it.